A simple woman told to kick the bear cub in joke. What she did put everyone in tears. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The afternoon heat pressed down on Mountain Valley like a heavy blanket. Marigold Thompson wiped sweat from her forehead as she bent over her carrots. Her small garden was her pride, growing vegetables behind the old post office where she worked. She had turned 40 last month, and the mirror showed silver threads weaving through her dark hair. The village had changed in the 10 years since she moved here. Back then, people knew each other's names. They shared meals and helped with harvests. Now, new folks moved in every month, bringing city ways and loud voices. Marigold straightened her back and heard laughter from the village square. She recognized the rough voices, the Mason brothers and their friends, always finding trouble. Today was Saturday, which meant they would be at Turner's pub by noon, their voices growing louder with each round of drinks. She turned back to her garden when something caught her eye. Between the tall grass at the edge of the clearing, a small brown shape moved. At first, she thought it was a dog, but then she saw the rounded ears and stumbling gait. Her breath caught in her throat. "Oh, dear God," she whispered. A bear cub, no bigger than a watermelon, wandered into her garden. Its fur was matted with mud, and one eye was swollen shut. The cub moved slowly, favoring its left front paw. It stopped near her tomatoes and sniffed the air, its nose twitching. Marigold's mind raced. Mother bears never left their cubs alone. Never. Something was terribly wrong. The cub looked up at her with its good eye. In that moment, Marigold saw something that shook her core. The same lost expression she had seen in her own mirror after her husband died 3 years ago. The laughter from the square grew louder. Someone had spotted the cub. "Well, well, what do we have here?" The gravelly voice belonged to Big Tom Mason, the oldest brother. He stood 6 feet tall and loved to show off his strength. "Looks like we got ourselves a visitor." Marigold stepped forward, her body moving between the cub and the approaching group. 5 men stumbled from the direction of Turner's pub, their faces red from drinking in the midday sun. "Back off, Tom," she said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. "That's a wild animal." "Wild?" Tom laughed, swaying slightly. "Looks like a stuffed toy to me. Hey, Bobby, dare you to give it a good kick?" Bobby Kowalski, thin and nervous, shook his head. "I ain't touching no bear." "Come on," urged Pete Wilson, always the instigator. "It's just a baby, probably not even real." The cub made a small whimpering sound, pressing closer to Marigold's leg. She felt its warmth through her cotton dress. "Maybe Mrs. Thompson should do it," suggested Harry Long, grinning. "Show us city folk how tough mountain women are." "Yeah, Marigold." Tom stepped closer. "Give it a boot, just for laughs." The air grew heavy, charged with something dangerous. Marigold could smell the alcohol on their breath, see the reckless glint in their eyes. These were men who had lost their way, seeking cheap thrills to fill empty spaces in their lives. "I will not," she said firmly. "Ah, come on," Pete wheedled. "We're just having fun. Fun. The word echoed in Marigold's mind. Her grandmother had warned her about men who found fun in hurting others. "Those are the ones who hurt themselves most," she had said. The cub trembled against her leg. Its tiny heart beat fast against her calf through the fabric. Marigold knew that somewhere in the woods, a mother bear might be searching frantically. Or worse, something might have happened to her. "Last chance, Marigold," Tom said, his voice dropping lower. "Do it, or we will." In that moment, Marigold felt something shift inside her. All her life, she had been careful, cautious, avoiding conflict. But looking down at this helpless creature, something awakened. "No," she said again, but this time her voice carried a different tone, authority, certainty. The men exchanged glances. Tom's face darkened. "You know what?" he said, then hiccuped. "I think I'll do it myself." He took a threatening step forward. The cub whimpered and tried to hide behind Marigold's legs. She could feel its trembling increase. Suddenly, a crack echoed through the clearing. Everyone froze. From the edge of the forest came a sound that made Marigold's blood run cold. A deep, rumbling growl that seemed to shake the ground itself. But the men were too drunk to notice, or too stupid to care. "What was that?" Bobby asked, his voice shaking. "Nothing," Tom scoffed. "Keep talking, Bobby, and I'll give you something to worry about." Another growl answered, closer this time. As the group prepared for the journey back down the mountain, Marigold overheard Agent Morrison on her radio. "Central? We're going to need the wildlife genetics team up here, and we may need to rewrite some textbooks." The walk back to the village felt different. Everyone processed the day's revelations in silence. Marigold kept touching the bear claw charm in her pocket, feeling its strange warmth. They were halfway down when Melissa suddenly stopped. "Wait, I forgot something important." She pulled out her phone, opened a video file, and handed it to Agent Morrison. "This is the most important evidence. Tom Mason's last shipment. It was supposed to go out tomorrow." Morrison played the video. It showed cages being loaded into trucks, bears sedated, marked with numbers instead of names. But the final frame showed something else entirely: coordinates and a schedule. "They're still planning the shipment?" Morrison's face hardened. "Without Tom. His partners think someone will step in," Melissa confirmed. "They have a backup plan and a backup operator." "Who?" Melissa looked directly at Reverend Hayes. "His sister-in-law, Monica Mason, Tom's sister." The Reverend's face went ashen. Martha would never. "Martha's been handling finances for the operation for over a year," Melissa revealed. "Did you really think Tom had that much money on his own?" As they returned to the village, they found federal agents already surrounding Martha Mason's house. The raids had begun while they were at Morgan's Ridge. Computers, documents, and enough evidence to connect dozens of people to the trafficking ring were being hauled out. But the biggest shock came when they reached the church. On the steps sat a wooden crate with air holes. Inside, weakly crying, was another bear cub. This one white as snow, extremely rare and probably worth a fortune on the black market. A note attached read, "Last one. Save her." Jerome had found one more victim to rescue. As Marigold held the tiny white cub, wrapping it in her sweater, she felt the weight of everything that had happened. Her simple act of kindness to a trapped bear had uncovered a conspiracy, saved lives both human and animal, and revealed truths about consciousness that would challenge the scientific world. "Mrs. Thompson," Connor Adams approached with his camera. "Would you mind if I took your picture with the cub? The Daily Ledger wants to run a story on the hero who started it all." But Marigold shook her head. "The real story isn't about me. It's about what happens when we choose compassion over cruelty, when we see intelligence in unexpected places, when we remember that we share this world." As sunset painted the sky orange and gold, similar to the highlights in Sage's fur, Marigold understood that some stories don't have simple endings. They ripple outward, changing communities, perspectives, and hearts. The mother bear's roar echoed from the mountains one more time that evening. Not a warning or a threat, but a greeting. A thank you. A promise. Mountain Valley would never be the same. and neither would anyone who learned the truth about the bears that had taught them so much about humanity. The birds in nearby trees suddenly went silent. Marigold's heart pounded. She knew that sound. Everyone who lived near the mountains knew that sound. It meant death was near. The cub made a chirping sound, high and desperate. It was calling for its mother. "Tom," Harry said cautiously, "maybe we should—" "Shut up!" Tom roared. "I'm teaching this woman a lesson." He lunged forward. Marigold acted without thinking. She grabbed the cub and held it against her chest, turning away from Tom's approach. The cub's claws dug into her arms, but she barely felt the pain. That's when they saw her. At the tree line, standing 8 feet tall on her hind legs, was the mother bear. Her fur was dark as midnight, her eyes burning with maternal fury. Scars crisscrossed her muzzle, telling tales of past battles. She was magnificent and terrifying. The men sobered instantly. "Run," Harry whispered, but it was too late for running. The mother bear dropped to all fours and charged. Section 2. Time slowed to a crawl. Marigold watched the massive bear rushing toward them, each thunderous step shaking the earth. The cub in her arms let out a desperate cry, and something extraordinary happened. The mother bear stopped dead in her tracks, not 20 feet from where they stood. Her massive head tilted, studying the scene. Marigold could see intelligence burning in those dark eyes, processing what she saw, a human female protecting her cub, not attacking it. The men scattered. Tom Mason tripped over his own feet in his haste to escape, landing face first in the dirt. Pete Wilson screamed as he ran, his voice going high and panicked. Bobby, Harry, and Jake Long stumbled into each other, then took off in different directions toward the village. But Marigold didn't run. She couldn't. Her legs felt rooted to the ground. The terrified cub clutched against her chest. Slowly, carefully, she sank to her knees, making herself smaller, less threatening. The mother bear watched her. Minutes passed in silence, except for the heavy breathing of both animals and the distant shouts of the fleeing men. "It's okay," Marigold whispered to the cub, though her own heart hammered against her ribs. "Your mama's here now." The cub whimpered softly, and the sound seemed to pierce its mother's hesitation. The great bear took a tentative step forward, then another. Marigold held her breath. That's when she noticed something that made her gasp. The mother bear's right back leg dragged behind her, leaving a trail of blood in the grass. A hunting trap's steel teeth still gripped her paw, the chain broken but the mechanism firmly attached. Each step cost her visible pain. "Oh, God," Marigold breathed. "You're hurt, too." The bear stopped at the sound of her voice. Their eyes met across the short distance, and in that moment, Marigold felt a connection she couldn't explain. Two mothers, both trying to protect what they loved. Very slowly, Marigold lowered the cub to the ground. It hesitated, then limped toward its mother on its injured paw. The mother bear lowered her massive head to inspect her cub, sniffing it, checking for injuries. The cub mewled and pressed against her massive leg. As she watched this reunion, Marigold noticed something else. In the grass nearby lay what appeared to be a collar, a leather and metal contraption with sharp studs pointing inward. It was covered in fresh blood and matted fur. The realization hit her like ice water. Someone had put a spiked collar on this bear's cub. Someone had deliberately trapped and tortured them. The mother bear seemed to sense Marigold's discovery. She raised her head, and for a long moment they simply looked at each other. Then, to Marigold's amazement, the bear lowered her head in what seemed almost like a nod. "Who did this to you?" Marigold whispered, tears stinging her eyes. The bear didn't answer, of course, But she did something unexpected. She limped closer, dragging her trapped leg. Marigold's instinct was to run, but something in the bear's posture, careful, deliberate, kept her still. The bear stopped a few feet away. This close, Marigold could see flecks of gray in her dark fur, scars crisscrossing her body. This was an old bear, wise and battle-tested. She wasn't here for revenge. The bear extended her trapped paw slightly, almost like a request. "You want help?" Marigold asked, her voice shaking. The bear made a low sound, something between a growl and a whine. Marigold looked around the clearing. The men were long gone, their shouts fading into the distance. Birds had begun to sing again. The sun continued its journey across the sky as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Taking a deep breath, Marigold stood slowly. The bear watched but didn't move. Step by careful step, Marigold edged closer to the paw. The trap was old, its teeth deeply embedded. Fresh blood dripped steadily onto the grass. "This is going to hurt," she murmured, reaching for the release mechanism she'd seen on similar traps in Old Man Peterson's shed. The bear tensed, but held still. Marigold could feel waves of heat radiating from the massive body. The cub watched anxiously from a safe distance. With strength born of necessity, Marigold pressed the release springs. The trap's jaws spread apart with a rusty squeal. The bear jerked her paw away, a roar of pain echoing through the clearing. Marigold scrambled backward, her heart racing. Blood poured from the wound, but the bear was free. She examined her paw, licking it gently. "I have bandages in my house," Marigold found herself saying. "If you'll let me." The bear looked at her again, that same intelligent gaze. Then she did something that would haunt Marigold's dreams for years to come. She dipped her massive head in what was unmistakably a gesture of acknowledgement. As Marigold turned toward her cottage, she heard footsteps behind her. Not heavy paw steps, but human ones. She spun around to find Sarah Chen, the village teacher, standing at the edge of her garden. Sarah had witnessed everything. "Marigold," Sarah said, her voice filled with wonder. "I've never seen anything like that in my life." Behind them, the mother bear and her cub disappeared into the forest, leaving only blood-stained grass and a broken trap to prove they had ever been there. But Sarah wasn't alone. As Marigold looked past her friend, she saw more faces emerging from behind in houses and trees. At least a dozen villagers had watched the entire encounter. Among them was Reverend Michael Hayes of the local church, his face pale with shock. Next to him stood Connor Adams, the town's newspaper editor, his camera hanging forgotten around his neck. Even old Mrs. Lily Morgan, who rarely left her house, stood in her doorway, clutching her shawl. "She freed them," Sarah said, louder now, for everyone to hear. "She freed the bears. This is witchcraft," Reverend Hayes suddenly shouted, his face contorting with fear and anger. "No Christian woman communes with beasts." Murmurs rippled through the small crowd. Some nodded in agreement with the Reverend, while others looked uncertain. Marigold felt a chill creep down her spine despite the warm afternoon sun. "It was mercy," Sarah defended firmly. "Nothing more." "Mercy?" The Reverend scoffed. "She could have gotten us all killed. Those were predators." "Those were injured animals," Marigold said quietly, finding her voice. "Someone trapped them. Someone tortured that cub. And we're supposed to care about that?" This from Tom Mason, returning from wherever he'd run to. His face was bruised from his fall, dirt still clinging to his clothes. "They're dangerous animals." "The only danger I saw," Connor Adams spoke up, adjusting his camera, "was from drunk men threatening a woman and a helpless creature." Tom's face reddened. "You calling us dangerous?" I'm calling what I saw, Connor replied evenly, and I think the whole village deserves to know what happened here today. Now, wait just a minute. Tom started forward, but stopped when he noticed the collective gaze of his neighbors on him. Marigold looked around at the faces gathered in her garden. She saw fear in some eyes, wonder in others, and in a few, like Sarah's and Connor's, something that might have been respect. I did what anyone with a heart would do, she said simply. I helped. Helped demons, muttered someone in the crowd. Helped God's creatures, Sarah countered sharply. The argument might have continued, but a new sound cut through the tension, the distant wail of police sirens. Someone had called the authorities. As the first sheriff's car appeared around the bend, Marigold noticed something else that made her heart drop. In the broken trap's metal teeth, caught among the blood and fur, was something white. Moving closer, her hands trembling, she extracted a business card. Blackthorn Hunting Supply, Premium Game Traps. Ask for Duke below. The address was a local phone number, and below that a handwritten note. Special order for TM Extra Teeth. Tom Mason went deathly pale when he saw the card. His friends noticed his reaction and began backing away slowly. Tom? Bobby asked nervously. What's that mean? But Tom had no answer, even as Sheriff Jacob Bennett stepped out of his patrol car, taking in the blood-stained scene, the scattered crowd, and the incriminating evidence in Marigold's hand. Someone want to tell me what happened here? The sheriff asked, his trained eyes missing nothing. Marigold held up the business card. We need to talk about trap laws in this county, Sheriff, and about who's been breaking them. As the pieces fell into place, the mood in the clearing shifted again. The reverend's accusations faded as Tom Mason's secret cruelty came to light. The village was about to learn that sometimes the real monsters wore human faces, but none of them, not Marigold, not the sheriff, not even the watching townspeople, could have predicted what would happen in the hours to come. The bears had left, yes, but they had left behind something more than just blood and broken traps. They had left behind the beginning of a transformation that would reshape Mountain Valley forever. The sheriff was just starting to question Tom Mason when a child's scream pierced the air. Little Emma Dawson, playing at the edge of the village, had found something horrifying in the creek. Something that would prove this was not just about one trapped mother bear and her cub. This was about something much bigger, much darker, and much more deadly. Section 3. Emma's screams continued, each one higher than the last. Her mother, Haley Dawson, burst from their house at the edge of the village, her face sheet white with terror. The sheriff abandoned Tom Mason, running toward the creek with others following close behind. Marigold followed too, a sense of dread building in her chest. She clutched the bloody business card, her fingers trembling. As they reached the creek, they found Emma standing on the muddy bank, pointing into the water with a shaking hand. There, trapped between two rocks where the water ran shallow, lay 3 bear cubs. Dead. Their bodies bloated, fur matted with mud and blood. But this wasn't the worst of it. Oh, God, Connor Adams whispered, raising his camera before lowering it again, unable to bring himself to take the picture. The cubs wore collars identical to the one they'd found in Marigold's garden, spiked leather that had torn into their flesh. But these collars had attachments, small GPS trackers still blinking their useless signals. Marigold felt her stomach turn as the implications hit her. Someone hadn't just trapped these bears. Someone had been tracking them, hunting them methodically. "Daddy?" Emma whimpered, reaching for her father who was pushing through the crowd. "That's enough, Emma." Logan Carter, the village's only veterinarian, said gently but firmly. He'd arrived just behind the sheriff. Sheriff Bennett, we need to document this. These bears, they've been dead at least 3 days. The same 3 days that Tom Mason had been mysterious gone from the village, claiming he was visiting family in the next county. Tom, Sheriff Bennett's voice cut like ice through the gathering crowd. You want to explain something to me? But Tom Mason had disappeared. In the commotion of Emma's discovery, he'd slipped away. His friends looked around nervously, realizing their leader had abandoned them. Bobby, the sheriff said sharply. Where's Tom going? I don't know, sir, Bobby stammered. He didn't tell us nothing about no dead cubs. But he told you about the traps, Logan Carter said, not asking but stating. His eyes had taken on a hard edge that Marigold had never seen before. What was Tom planning to do with mama bears he caught? No one answered, but their silence spoke volumes. Jake, the sheriff called to his deputy, Jake Miller. Radio the other counties. Put out an APB on Tom Mason's truck. And call the State Wildlife Board. We need their experts here. As Jake hurried away, Marigold found herself drawn back to the creek. She knelt beside the small bodies, tears streaming down her face. 3 innocents caught in someone's cruel game. Marigold, Logan knelt beside her. I've been treating injured bears for years. These cubs, they didn't die naturally. What do you mean? These collars, they're designed to cause pain, but not kill. Something else killed these cubs. He pointed to subtle marks on their bodies. Tranquilizer darts, professional grade. Someone was studying them? Reverend Hayes asked, his earlier anger forgotten in the face of this horror. Or training them, Logan said grimly. There's a market for trained bears, illegal fighting rings, private collections. Some people pay fortunes for apex predators they can control. The crowd fell silent, processing this revelation. Marigold felt sick, not just from what she was learning, but from the memory of the mother bear's intelligent eyes. How many of her cubs had she lost to this horror? The mama bear we saw, Sarah Chen said slowly. She had scars, old ones and new. Someone's been hunting her family for a long time, and likely selling information to others who want to hunt here, Connor added, his journalistic instincts kicking in. Tom Mason could be running a poaching ring right under our noses. A new voice joined the conversation, causing everyone to turn. He was. Walking down the path from the forest came a woman none of them had seen before. She was in her 30s, wearing ranger gear, a badge glinting on her chest. Behind her, 2 armed men in similar uniforms followed. Special Agent Riley Morrison. She introduced herself, showing credentials to Sheriff Bennett. Federal Wildlife Protection Division. We've been tracking Tom Mason for 6 months. The crowd murmured in shock. Federal agents? In Mountain Valley? You knew? Sheriff Bennett demanded. You knew what was happening in my county? We knew he was part of a larger operation, Agent Morrison replied carefully. But we needed to catch them all, not just the local operators. Tom Mason was bait. We've been monitoring him, gathering evidence. The GPA callers, Logan realized. You weren't tracking the bears. You were tracking who was tracking the bears. Agent Morrison nodded. Until today, we didn't have enough evidence to move in. But now... She looked at Marigold, then at the dead cubs. Mrs. Thompson's actions this afternoon may have saved more than just one mother bear. How do you know my name? Marigold asked, disturbed. We've been watching everything Tom does, the agent explained, and who he interacts with. We know he tried to pressure you, the local shop owners, even the church board to look the other way about his hunting trips. Reverend Hayes flinched visibly. He made a generous donation last month. Blood money, Sarah spat, built on the suffering of animals. The operation is bigger than just Mountain Valley, Agent Morrison continued. We've tracked similar patterns in 5 counties. High-value targets, grizzlies, wolves, mountain lions, being captured, equipped with tracking devices, then hunted in controlled environments for wealthy clients. You mean they weren't killing the animals for trophies, Connor reasoned out loud. They were creating live hunting experiences. Catch and release for a price. Sometimes catch and release, Morrison confirmed grimly. Sometimes catch and keep. We found evidence of private exotic animal collections. And sometimes, she looked at Emma, who was still being comforted by her parents. Sometimes the animals didn't survive the training process. The mama bear, Marigold whispered, understanding flooding her. Today wasn't just about revenge. She was protecting the last of her family. We believe those collars came from the same batch used on at least 20 bears in the past 18 months, Morrison said. Most never survived. The one you saw today, she's what we call a ghost bear. She's evaded capture multiple times, lost several litters, and somehow keeps surviving. Where is Tom? Sheriff Bennett asked, his face flushed with anger at being kept in the dark. You must know. We're coordinating with state police, Morrison assured him. His truck was spotted heading toward River Pass, but we need this community's help. Tom Mason had associates here, people who helped him scout locations, identify animals, and... She paused, looking directly at Pete Wilson, who was still among the crowd. People who kept others quiet about what they saw. Pete Wilson suddenly looked like he might be sick. I want full cooperation from everyone here, Sheriff Bennett declared, his authority reasserted. If you know anything about Tom Mason's activities, you speak up now or face obstruction charges. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Marigold noticed Harry Long trying to discreetly back away, and suddenly realized how deeply this corruption might run. Wait, she called out, her voice carrying. There's something else. All eyes turned to her. She held up the business card again. Blackthorn Hunting Supply. This isn't a local store. I've never heard of it. It's a front company, Morrison confirmed. Registered to a shell corporation in Nevada, but we traced the orders. Tom Mason has spent over $50,000 in the past year on specialized trapping equipment. Where did he get that kind of money? Haley Dawson asked, bouncing Emma in her arms as the child began to calm. That's what we're hoping to find out, Morrison said. But we suspect Tom was just the middleman. The real money is coming from somewhere else, possibly someone in this very village. Suspicious glances rippled through the crowd. Neighbors who had known each other for years suddenly became strangers, everyone wondering who else might be involved. We're going to need to search Tom's property, Sheriff Bennett decided. Johnson Farm, who has a key? His sister Monica, Bobby offered quickly, apparently deciding cooperation was his best option. She lives in the blue house near the church. And one more thing, Agent Morrison added, producing her phone. We need everyone who witnessed what happened this afternoon to stay available for statements. What you saw, a wild bear trusting a human enough to allow help, that's extraordinary. It suggests this particular bear has had non-violent human contact before. You think someone was helping her? Marigold asked, surprised. We found medical supplies near one of her dens, Morrison revealed. Someone's been treating her wounds, not trapping them. The revelation sent another wave of shock through the gathered villagers. If Tom Mason was hunting bears, someone else was saving them. The village had been harboring both villain and hero without realizing it. Who would... Reverend Hayes started, then stopped. a realization dawning on his face. Old Jerome. Old Jerome. Sheriff Bennett frowned. The hermit who lives up Morgan's Ridge. I saw him at the veterinary clinic last month, Logan Carter admitted, buying antibiotics. Said they were for his dog, but he doesn't have a dog. Jerome. Sarah Chen's eyebrows rose. He's been leaving the village council meetings every time Tom tries to speak. I thought he was just antisocial. Maybe he wasn't antisocial, Marigold said thoughtfully. Maybe he was afraid. Afraid of what Tom might do if he spoke up. We need to talk to Jerome, Agent Morrison decided. Sheriff Bennett, can you take a team to Morgan's Ridge? The rest of us will search Tom's farm. As people began to disperse, following orders and assignments, Marigold found herself alone by the creek. The federal agents were careful not to disturb the crime scene as they photographed the dead cubs. She knew she should leave too, but something kept her there. Then she heard it. A low sound, barely audible above the creek's babbling, a growl that raised every hair on her neck. She turned slowly, knowing what she would see. The mother bear stood at the edge of the forest, partially hidden in shadows. She was watching the proceedings, her massive form tensed, but she wasn't alone. Marigold blinked rapidly, thinking her eyes deceived her. But no, standing beside the mother bear was the cub from earlier, its injured paw bandaged with what looked like torn cloth. And between them stood an old man, thin and weathered, wearing a patched coat. Old Jerome. Their eyes met across the distance. Jerome raised one finger to his lips in a universal gesture for silence. Marigold nodded imperceptibly. The mother bear huffed softly as if understanding the exchange. For a moment, the three unlikely companions watched Marigold, one human, one mother bear, and one vulnerable cub, bound together by secrets and sorrow. Then they disappeared back into the forest, leaving Marigold with a racing heart and more questions than ever. But her discoveries weren't over. As she turned to finally head home, she stumbled over something half buried in the mud. Bending down, she uncovered what appeared to be a journal, wrapped in oilcloth to protect it from the elements. With trembling fingers, she opened it. The first page made her blood run cold. Operation Apex, Phase 3. Local assets confirmed. Tom Mason, primary contractor. Unknown benefactor, Mountain Valley resident. Richard Coleman, state representative, enabling legislation. Dr. Marcus Klein, private wildlife consultant. Targets acquired. Ghost bear, female, primary target. 3 cubs, harvested, November 15th. Alpha wolf pair, pending. Mountain lion, phantom, tracking. Next shipment, live cargo to client Alpha, $150,000. Marigold's hands shook as she read the entries. The journal detailed a sophisticated wildlife trafficking operation that went far beyond Tom Mason. There were maps, schedules, and most disturbing of all, photographs. Photos of the dead cubs, photos of other animals in cages, and photos of Mountain Valley residents, including one that made her gasp. Pastor Michael Hayes shaking hands with an unknown man beside a large truck. The timestamp read 3 days ago. The journal slipped from her hands, landing in the mud. She looked up to find Agent Morrison standing nearby, having noticed her distress. "Mrs. Thompson, what is it?" Words failed her. She could only point at the fallen journal. Morrison picked it up, flipped through a few pages, then swore under her breath. "Sheriff Bennett, I need you here. Now." As the terrible truth began to unravel, Marigold realized the confrontation with the mama bear had been merely the opening act in a drama that would tear Mountain Valley apart. The woman she'd helped that afternoon hadn't just been fighting for her cub's life. She'd been fighting against an enemy that walked on 2 legs, slept in warm beds, and prayed in their church on Sundays. And now that enemy knew that Marigold had seen too much. That night, after giving statements to the police and federal agents, after watching Tom Mason's farm get searched and finding even more evidence of his crimes, after the whole village learned that the respected reverend had been taking bribes to look the other way, Marigold finally returned to her cottage. As she unlocked her door, she found something that changed everything again. On her doorstep lay a small leather pouch. Inside were two things: a bear claw charm, carefully wrapped in soft moss, and a note written in shaky handwriting. She remembers. She protects those who protect her. Jerome. Marigold lifted the charm to the moonlight. The claw was ancient, polished smooth by time and the handling. It felt warm in her palm, almost alive. Looking out into the darkness beyond her garden, she thought she saw movement in the tree line, a massive shape watching her. The mother bear hadn't just remembered her kindness. She had chosen her as an ally in a war Marigold was only beginning to understand. And this war was far from over. Inside her cottage, the phone rang. When she answered, a voice she didn't recognize spoke words that chilled her. "You made a mistake today, Marigold Thompson. Some secrets are worth dying to keep. Ask the minister's missing daughter." The line went dead. Rain began to fall, pattering on her roof. In the distance, a bear roared, not in anger, but in warning. The battle for Mountain Valley's soul had only just begun. Section 4. Marigold didn't sleep that night. Every creak in her old cottage sounded like footsteps on the porch. Every gust of wind rattled windows like someone testing for entry. The threatening phone call echoed in her mind. Ask the minister's missing daughter. By dawn, exhausted but determined, she made coffee and sat at her kitchen table, the bear claw charm in front of her. Sunlight filtered through lace curtains, making the polished claw gleam. She reached for it, and the moment her fingers closed around it, images flooded her mind. She saw the mother bear standing on a rocky outcrop, saw her cubs playing nearby, 4, not 3, saw the moment they discovered the traps, felt the rage and sorrow as children were stolen one by one, and then something else. She saw herself from the bear's perspective, saw herself kneeling with the cub, felt the bear's surprise, then cautious trust. Then the image shifted to show someone else, old Jerome, moving quietly through the forest, healing wounded animals, leaving offerings of berries and herbs. The vision ended as abruptly as it began, leaving Marigold gasping. She dropped the charm, and reality returned. A knock at her door made her jump. Through the window she saw Sarah Chen, pale-faced and wringing her hands. "Sarah, what time is it?" 6:30, Sarah said breathlessly as Marigold let her in. "I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what I overheard yesterday before the bear incident." "What do you mean?" "I was cleaning my classroom after school. The windows were open and I heard Tom Mason arguing with someone behind the building. They didn't know I was there." Sarah accepted the coffee Marigold offered, her hands shaking slightly. "Tom was angry," he said. "The old man's been interfering. If we don't deal with him soon, everything falls apart." Old Jerome, Marigold realized. That's what the other voice said. They mentioned keeping him quiet about previous operations. Sarah set down her cup. "Marigold, what if Jerome didn't just start protecting bears recently? What if he knows about bodies?" The chill that ran down Marigold's spine had nothing to do with the early morning air. The minister's missing daughter. Sarah nodded grimly. "Melissa Hayes disappeared 2 years ago. The Reverend said she ran away to the city. But what if—" They were interrupted by sirens wailing through the village. Marigold rushed to her window. 3 police cars, followed by Agent Morrison's unmarked vehicle, raced past toward the church. Something's happened, Marigold said, grabbing her coat. They hurried out, joining other villagers streaming toward the commotion. The scene at the church was shocking. The beautiful stained glass window, the one Tom Mason's generous donation had paid for, lay shattered on the ground. Inside, furniture was overturned, benches splintered, and on the altar, written in what looked like blood, were the words, "The dead have teeth." Reverend Hayes sat on the church steps, his head in his hands. His wife, Patricia, stood nearby, staring at the destruction with glazed eyes. "When did this happen?" Agent Morrison was asking. "Sometime after midnight," the sheriff responded. "Reverend Hayes found it this morning during his usual morning prayers." "Michael," Patricia Hayes suddenly spoke, her voice hollow. "Tell them. You have to tell them." "Patricia, please, no!" She pointed a shaking finger at him. "No more secrets, no more lies." She turned to Agent Morrison. "Melissa didn't run away. She found out about the hunting operation. She threatened to expose everything." The Reverend's shoulders slumped in defeat. "I tried to stop her. I told her to leave town, to forget what she knew. I thought she had taken my advice." "What about the blood on the altar?" Morrison pressed. Patricia Hayes' laugh was bitter and broken. "That's not blood. It's raspberry juice from our garden, Melissa's favorite. She used to write notes in it when she was little. This is her handwriting." The crowd murmured in shock. Marigold pushed forward. "Mrs. Hayes, are you saying Melissa is still here, still alive?" Patricia met her gaze. "I don't know, but someone who knew her very well did this. Someone who knows our family secrets." "The dead have teeth," Connor Adams muttered, taking photographs. "It's an old mountain saying. It means the past will bite back." "Where exactly did Melissa go the night she disappeared?" Agent Morrison demanded. "She went to meet old Jerome," Reverend Hayes finally admitted. "She'd been visiting him, learning about the forest, the animals. She said he was the only honest person in the valley." As the crowd processed this revelation, Marigold noticed something the others hadn't. In the flower bed beside the church steps, fresh bear tracks pressed into the soft earth, accompanied by smaller prints, a child's footprints. "Look," she pointed. Agent Morrison knelt to examine the tracks. "These are fresh, within the last hour." The implications were staggering. A missing girl, a hermit who protected bears, and now tracks suggesting what? That the mother bear was connected to Melissa? "Sheriff," a deputy came running. "We found Tom Mason's truck, abandoned at Devil's Canyon. No sign of him, but there's blood, and we found a map that marks Jerome's cabin." "We need to get to Morgan's Ridge," Morrison said decisively. "Now." As the law enforcement team mobilized, Marigold found herself swept along. Sarah grabbed her arm. "I'm coming too. Something tells me you're at the center of this now." The journey to Morgan's Ridge took them along treacherous mountain paths that few modern vehicles could traverse. They had to abandon their cars halfway and continue on foot. The forest seemed to watch them, branches creaking, birds following overhead. Old Jerome's cabin appeared like a ghost house in a clearing. Built from weathered timber, covered in moss and vines, it looked like it had grown from the earth itself. Smoke rose from a chimney, suggesting someone was home. But as they approached, the forest erupted with sound. Bears, not just one, but 5 or 6, emerged from the trees. The mother bear Marigold had helped stood at the front, her cub beside her. Behind them, other bears of various sizes formed a protective line. The rescue party stopped dead. No one dared reach for weapons with this many predators facing them. "Jerome!" Sheriff Bennett called. "This is the law. We need to talk." The cabin door opened. Old Jerome stepped out, followed by something that made everyone gasp. A girl, about 20, with wild red hair and wearing clothes that had seen better days, stood beside him. She was thin but healthy, her eyes bright and alert. "Melissa?" Reverend Hayes stared, disbelieving. "Melissa, is that you?" "Hello, Father," she said, her voice carrying clearly. "I've been protecting our real congregation all along." Marigold's eyes were drawn to the girl's left arm. Around her wrist was a bracelet of bear claws, similar to the charm Jerome had left for her, and at her feet, completely at ease, sat a young wolf. "My God," Sarah whispered, "she's become one of them." "She saved them," Jerome corrected, his gravelly voice stronger than expected. "Saved them from your hunters, from your traps, from your cruelty." "Tom Mason." Agent Morrison stepped forward carefully. "Where is he?" Jerome spat on the ground. "Screaming in hell, I hope. Beast got him. Justice found him before you did." "What do you mean?" the agent pressed. "Found his body this morning," Melissa spoke up. "The male bear, the one Tom caught and tortured last month, tracked him down. Nature has its own courts." She pointed to the forest. Following her gesture, they saw 4 more bears emerging, dragging something between them. Tom Mason's body, mangled almost beyond recognition. Several people in the group turned away, sickened. But Marigold looked at Melissa, understanding dawning. "You've been working with the bears," she said. "They're not just protecting you. You're part of their family." Melissa smiled sadly. "When humans fail you, sometimes other families adopt you. Jerome taught me that animals can see truth better than most people." "Melissa," her father pleaded, stepping forward. The bears tensed, and he stopped. "Come home, please. We can fix this." "Fix what, Father? The corruption you enabled? The lives you helped destroy for money?" Her voice hardened. "You knew Tom was killing cubs. You knew about the trafficking ring, and you prayed over the money he paid you." Patricia Hayes collapsed to her knees, sobbing. "We thought you were dead. We mourned you." "You should have mourned your conscience instead," Melissa retorted. Agent Morrison cleared her throat. "Miss Hayes, we need your testimony, evidence about the trafficking operation." "It's all here," Jerome said, producing a stack of journals. "Every sale, every kill, every buyer, 2 years of records. Melissa helped me document everything." As the agent began examining the journals, Marigold noticed something remarkable. The bears hadn't attacked, despite dozens of humans invading their territory. They watched, waited, protected, but showed no aggression unless provoked. The mother bear especially seemed calm, as if she knew this moment would come. "There's something else," Melissa said. "The big clients Tom worked for, they're not just rich people wanting exotic pets or hunting experiences. They're researchers, black market researchers studying animal intelligence. They've been using our mountain special bears for experiments." "Special how?" Morrison asked sharply. "These bears," Jerome explained, "they're smarter than regular bears. Genetics, isolation. Something in this valley bred special intelligence. The mother bear you met, Marigold, she understands complex ideas, recognizes faces, plans ahead, grieves, hope. They're closer to humans than most humans realize." "That's why the operation was centered here," Melissa continued. "Not for the hunting, for the research subjects. Tom Mason was shipping live, intelligent bears to laboratories running controversial cognitive experiments. The revelation stunned everyone. This wasn't just about cruelty or money. This was about science gone wrong, studying creatures that might bridge the gap between animal and human consciousness. "How do you know all this?" Morrison demanded. Melissa pulled out a battered smartphone. "I've been documenting everything, intercepting communications. I have video evidence, recorded calls, everything needed to shut down the entire network." "Then why didn't you go to the authorities?" "Because some of your authorities were on their payroll," Jerome answered grimly. "Took us time to figure out who to trust." The enormity of the conspiracy was overwhelming. As discussions continued about evidence, arrests, and legal procedures, Marigold found herself drawn to the mother bear. The massive creature watched her intently. Slowly, Marigold approached. This time, she wasn't afraid. In her pocket, she felt the bear claw charm growing warm. "Thank you," she whispered when she was close enough, "for trusting me, for giving me a chance to help." The bear huffed softly and extended her injured paw, the one Marigold had freed from the trap. It was healing well, thanks to Jerome and Melissa's care. In the sunlight filtering through the trees, Marigold saw that the bear's dark fur held highlights of brown and gold, patterns that seemed almost artistic. "She has a name," Melissa said, coming to stand beside Marigold. "We call her Sage. She's the matriarch of all the bears in this valley." "Sage," Marigold repeated. The bear's ears twitched at the name. "And her cub, we call her Hope, because as long as she lives, there's hope the valley's bears will survive." As Marigold watched, other bears began emerging from the forest. Not just the 5 or 6 they'd seen initially, but dozens. Bears of all ages. Some clearly related to Sage, forming a community she'd never imagined existed. "This is what Tom Mason was destroying," Jerome said heavily. "An ecosystem of intelligence. A society of beings more noble than most humans." "And now?" Sheriff Bennett asked, looking overwhelmed by the scope of the revelations. "Now we rebuild," Agent Morrison decided. "Jerome, Melissa, we need all your evidence. There will be trials, probably federal investigations spanning multiple states." "And our bear family?" Melissa asked pointedly. "What happens to them?" Morrison looked at the assembled bears, clearly struggling with the implications of what she'd learned. "That's above my pay grade. But I think after today, no one will dare hunt them anymore." "They deserve protection," Marigold spoke up. "Special protection. After what they've been through. After what they've shown us about intelligence, about dignity, about—" She struggled for words. "About consciousness," Sarah finished for her. "They've shown us consciousness isn't limited to humans." As the sun climbed higher, painting the forest in golden light, something shifted in the air. The bears began to disperse, melting back into the trees with remarkable silence. Sage lingered longest, maintaining eye contact with Marigold until the very end. When the last bear disappeared, Melissa began packing her makeshift smartphone equipment. "I'll come back to the village, testify, help bring justice, but I'm not staying, not anymore. The forest is my home now." "And Jerome?" the sheriff asked. "I've lived outside society too long," the old man admitted. "But I'll come down to answer questions, sign papers, whatever needs doing to protect what we've built here."